Welcome back to another Infinite Flight tutorial. Today, I'll show you how to fly the Airbus 380. This quadjet is the largest airliner in the world and currently the only aircraft to boast the Super classification. With a range of over 8,000 miles and a seating capacity over 500, it's built to connect continents in the most comfortable way imaginable. We're at the gate in Dubai and prepping for our journey east to Tokyo Narita. You can follow along with the flight parameters on the right. At the gate, we'll turn on our battery, APU, and nav light. Once the ground service equipment is disconnected, we'll turn on the beacon and prepare for pushback and engine start. Due to the aircraft's size, you will need to begin your pushback turn early and anticipate a very wide turn to properly line up on the taxiway. With pushback complete, we'll begin the engine start procedure with the number 1 and number 2 engine simultaneously. Once stable, we'll start the number 3 and number 4 engine. At lighter weights, you can also use a reduced engine taxi procedure using a combination of 2 engines. Check out that procedure on the right. We're now ready to taxi. Our taxi to 30 right has been announced. Takeoff flaps are set to the 1+F position, and I'll advance the power to no more than 40% N1 to get rolling. Note that we're leaving our APU on due to the higher takeoff power needed today. More on that in a minute. Due to the aircraft's size, I recommend no more than a walking pace in the gate area, about 5 to 10 knots to ensure wingtip clearance. On straightaways, you should not exceed 20 knots. 90-degree turns will be accomplished at or below 10 knots, turning much wider than normal to account for the sheer mass of the A380 and its large wheelbase. Now let's talk takeoff. Today's takeoff weight is over 1 million pounds with 62% load. Takeoffs above 55% load will utilize takeoff thrust settings rather than the flex or reduced setting commonly used at lighter weights. Because we're using a takeoff setting, our APU will remain on until the climb power is set, rather than being turned off shortly after the engine startup procedure. We're utilizing the 1+ flap configuration with takeoff power setting of 97% or 108% N1 and a rotation speed today of 155 knots. Flaps 2 will be used for heavier departures on runways 10,000 feet or less. Flaps 3 is only to be used for runways shorter than 8,000 feet. As we line up on the runway centerline, I'll advance the thrust to 25%. Once engines are stabilized, we'll further advance to our takeoff power setting of 108% N1. This A380's powerful Rolls-Royce engines quickly accelerate us to our takeoff speed of 155 knots. We'll smoothly and consistently rotate to 15 degrees or more to maintain our initial climb speed of about 185 knots. Passing 1,000 feet above the airport, I reduce to a climb power setting of no more than 98% thrust, lower the nose, and begin a gradual acceleration to 250 knots. Flaps 1 are set approaching 200 knots, and we'll clean up the aircraft prior to 220 knots. Once stable, I also turn off the APU. As always, I recommend hand flying the aircraft below 10,000 feet as you get accustomed to its handling characteristics. As we pass 10,000 feet, we'll turn off our landing light, turn off the seatbelt sign, and lower the nose to our climb speed of 320 knots. We'll pitch for 320 knots all the way up to our initial cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. Note that we'll climb at Mach 0.85 above 28,000 feet. The A380's maximum cruising altitude is flight level 430, and it cruises between Mach 0.83 and 0.85. This can greatly vary based on the aircraft weight and desired fuel burn. While at cruise, your thrust should never exceed 98%. Don't forget to take in the views along the way as well. While it's not fun for the passengers, turbulent wing views never disappoint. For long hauls, I recommend step climbing. This means starting at a lower initial cruise altitude in an effort to maximize efficiency and burn more fuel weight before climbing higher. Halfway through our flight to Tokyo, we'll step it up to 37,000 feet. Be sure to check out our full step climb manual and the Infinite Flight flying guide. It's recommended that you use VNAV while descending in the Airbus 380. Check out our video tutorial for more on that. The A380 is an extremely slippery aircraft, so we'll ensure we're proactive with our speed and descent management, trying not to exceed 2,500 feet per minute below 20,000 feet. I recommend reducing to 250 knots around 16,000 feet, unless ATC instructs otherwise, to meet the 250 knot speed limit below 10,000. We're approaching our destination, and it's time to begin the arrival phase. The approach mode feature can be a great tool to reduce your workload on final. So I've set the Narita ILS 34 left to nav 1, and I'll be sure to change my source and activate the approach mode once established on a 30-degree intercept to final, level at 4,000. Ensure you're also slowed to 180 knots by 10 nautical miles, setting flaps as needed according to the recommended extension speeds shown on the right. Due to the size and lack of maneuverability at slow speeds, we're going to aim to be fully configured and on profile much earlier than usual. As I approach 2,500 feet above the airport, we'll go gear down and continue slowing to our approach speed of 140 knots for today's landing weight of roughly 800,000 pounds or 30% load. The A380 lands in the flaps full configuration, though flaps 3 can be used for extremely light landings much like other Airbus models. This can be advantageous when using long runways, battling heavy winds, or when a higher approach speed is needed for the traffic sequence. By 1,000 feet, we're on glide and on speed and can go ahead and disable the autopilot. Don't forget to calibrate your device in the menu first. Due to the size of the A380's massive control surfaces, it handles heavy winds and crosswinds extremely well. If needed, tilt your ailerons into the wind and use rudder to align the nose with the runway centerline before touchdown. At 50 feet, we'll begin to arrest our descent and flare to approximately 5 degrees nose high, producing power to idle at 20 feet. Hold off the nose, maintain directional control, and allow the aircraft to settle onto the runway. After the main gear touchdown, we'll continue to fly the aircraft all the way to the ground, applying back pressure to gently lower the nose. Apply reverse thrusters followed by manual or auto braking depending on the required stopping distance. Stow your reverse thrusters at 60 knots and continue slowing the aircraft to 20 knots for high-speed exits or no more than 10 knots for hard 90-degree turnoffs. Once we've exited the runway, we'll turn off our strobe and landing light, start the APU, and make our way to the gate. Note that eligible gates for your aircraft size will be represented by a white gate icon on the map. Gate entry speed should not exceed 5 knots. Once parked, shut down the engines, activate ground service for the aircraft, and continue shutting down the Airbus 380 systems in preparation for its next journey around the world. Thanks so much for joining me on this flight today. Be sure to check out the in-depth A380 Quick Reference Guide created by the Infinite Flight community linked in the description below, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want more great content like this. We'll see you next time.